Welcome to the CarveWright Tips and Tricks February 2011 issue. This is part 2 of pocket cutting techniques with your CarveWright and continues beyond what was covered in part 1. In this tutorial, we'll learn when it may be useful to apply alternative bits to carve regions and drilled pockets, and also how you can incorporate third-party software along with CarveWright Designer add-on software to help you create various pocket shapes and styles. You may recall in Part 1 I demonstrated pocket cuts using the Carve Region tool. By default, Designer will use the 1/16 inch tapered carving bit, but will leave a 7-degree taper on the sidewalls of the region due to the geometry of the bit. It is possible to change the default carving bit assignment for a project. I'll show you how this is done and explain the circumstances when it is appropriate to do so. I've opened a new project in Designer. We'll turn off the board texture and turn off the perspective view. Let's draw an oval and center it in the workpiece. Make it into a carve region and set it for a depth of 1/2 inch. We already have learned that this will be carved out with the default carving bit, the 1/16 inch tapered carving bit, and leave a 7-degree taper on the vertical sidewalls. However, CarveWright has an optional carving bit called the 3/16 inch ball nose carving bit, which we can select, and it will yield straight sidewalls on carve regions. To change the carving bit, go to the Edit menu and select Board Settings. We have 3 tabs: our board dimensions, pattern bit, and stain and finish. Select pattern bit. By default, it's already selected the 1/16 inch ball nose, which is a synonym for the tapered carving bit that comes with your machine. Let's select the 3/16 inch ball nose. The preview looks about the same as it did before. However, at the machine you'll be prompted to insert the 3/16 inch ball nose carving bit. By using the 3/16 inch ball nose, your carve regions will have straight vertical sides. Presently, at the time of the making of this tutorial, you can only use one carving bit for all the carving procedures in a project. You cannot mix and match different carving bits within the same project. Since all carving operations will be performed using whatever single carving bit you've specified, it's important to observe the Designer preview carefully to make sure your carving bit selection is suitable for all elements in your project. Be sure to use bit optimization best on all raster carve items such as patterns, so that the preview is updated to show how the bit will perform. This will help you decide when it may or may not be beneficial to choose the 3/16 inch carving bit for your project. Projects that don't contain a lot of tiny details will usually enjoy significantly reduced machining time when using the 3/16 inch carving bit. This can be ideal when making larger signs or any project that doesn't require the standard 1/16 inch carving bit to render small details. In part 1 of the pocket cutting tutorial, we've already learned how easy it is to create round pocket cuts using the drill tool and the 1/8 inch straight cutting bit that comes with your machine. I want to quickly show you that you can select another straight bit for your drill pockets instead. I've opened a new project in Designer and will click on our drill tool and click on the board. This opens the drill tool dialog box where we can set our parameters for the drilled pocket. Let's make this one 5 inches in diameter, the depth 1/2 inch, and the maximum pass depth 1/4 inch. We have a bit selection box here. Here by default is the 1/8 inch straight cutting bit that we used in tutorial part 1. You also have the option to choose the 3/16 inch straight bit and an option to choose a 1/16 inch straight bit. Both the 3/16 and the 1/16 inch straight bits are optional bits available directly from CarveWright. The 3/16 inch bit is suitable for just about any project, and the 1/16 inch straight bit is suitable for holes or pockets that are less than 1/8 inch in diameter and less than 1/4 inch deep. So in our case, this project is 3/4 inch material and we're going a 1/2 inch deep, so we'll need to use either the 1/8 inch or the 3/16 inch bit. Since our pocket is rather large, we can choose the 3/16 inch bit. Now there is no difference between the preview and the outcome of whether or not we select the 1/8 inch straight bit or the 3/16 inch straight bit. It's just that the larger straight bit, in this case the 3/16, will actually perform this pocket cut faster and save on machining time. I just thought you'd like to know that you had that option. In this final section of the tutorial, I'll present a brief overview of the use of third-party software that can be helpful for creating bit vectors for certain types of shaped pockets. These vectors can then be imported into Designer, where you can assign the appropriate bit for cutting the pockets with your CarveWright machine. There is a very popular vector drawing program that many of you may already own, namely CorelDRAW. I use CorelDRAW for many CarveWright related tasks, but for now I'll focus on bit vector creation and leave discussion about additional benefits to CarveWright owners for another time. I've already opened a copy of the CorelDRAW software and drawn these 4 shapes. These shapes will become pockets in the Designer software. Assuming that we'll be using the 1/8 inch straight cutting bit in order to cut the pockets, and we want straight vertical walls, these shapes will be offset by 1/16 of an inch increments until the shape is filled. To create the vectors manually in Designer software, it can be time-consuming and somewhat challenging. In CorelDRAW, we have a more automated method of doing this. In the Effects menu, CorelDRAW has a feature called the Contour tool that some of you may already be familiar with. Select the Contour tool. The menu will open that shows us the various options available to us. We can set the offset vectors to the center, the inside, or to the outside of each shape. The offset amount can be specified, in this case in inches, and if we choose the inside or outside options, we can also select the number of steps that we want. So if we want one step, 1/16 of an inch spaced apart from that outer vector, or we can put any number of steps that we desire in there. In this case, however, I want this to fill the shape, so all I need to do is click the center option, and we'll click on a shape, let's say the 5-pointed star, and we'll simply click Apply. As you can see, CorelDRAW has automatically and instantly created all the inset vectors that we need for assigning the 1/8 inch straight cutting bit for our pocket cut. Let me repeat this for all the remaining shapes. As you can see, this is a very quick and easy method to create all the vectors you need for assigning your bit. All that remains now is to select all of these shapes, either individually or I'm going to select them all in this case, all 4 of them, and I'll need to export the vectors in the DXF format. I'm going to go ahead and overwrite this 4 shapes DXF, click on Export, tell it I want to replace it, and we have export version options. DXF is an AutoCAD format, and we have the older AutoCAD formats available to us here. I like to use AutoCAD 2004. We also have export units in inches, or you could have millimeters. Export text as curves or text, and of course you've got all these other options that we really don't need to be concerned with for this particular example. So we'll just take the defaults and click OK. Now that we've created our vectors in the CorelDRAW software and saved them in the DXF format, they're ready to be imported into the Designer software for use for creating our pockets. We can import the DXF vectors by using the optional add-on software license for the CarveWright Designer software called the CarveWright DXF Importer. Once you've licensed this software, it'll be available to you under the File menu in the Designer software under the menu item Import. Simply select the Import DXF file, click on Import DXF on the Import interface, and navigate to the folder where you saved your DXF file. Click on it, click Open, and you'll see all of the vectors imported directly into the DXF importer and displayed here in red because they are all selected. We can check to make sure that the vectors are all connected by clicking on the Auto Connect button. It'll tell us how many vectors are selected, in this case 58, and how many vectors are closed. We see here that all the vectors are selected and all the vectors are closed. So all we need to do now is click on the Boards tab, add a new board, and click Finish, and you see all of the vectors have been imported onto a new board in the Designer software. Let's deselect all of the vectors and zoom in. You can see the dotted lines represent our vectors. Let's say that we want to take just this 5-pointed star and make that into our pocket cut. Select all of the vectors for the star, select Copy, and let's start a new project, and then we'll paste our copy of the vectors into this new project. While they're all selected, we can simply move them to any position we'd like to on the board. And as long as they're selected, let's go ahead and assign our 1/8 inch straight bit. Let's make this pocket cut a depth of 1/4 of an inch and click OK. Deselect the vectors, and we can see that we've instantly created a pocket cut with straight vertical sides using the vectors that were created in the CorelDRAW software, saved as DXF, and then imported into the Designer software using the Designer DXF Importer add-on. We can repeat this process for any of the shapes that we've created, and so we virtually have unlimited possibilities for the shapes we can create as a pocket cut for the Designer software. I hope you've enjoyed learning about additional methods you can employ for creating pocket cuts for your CarveWright Designer projects. We've seen how to use alternative bit assignments for carve region pockets, as well as drill tool round pockets, and a quick method for creating offset vectors for various shapes using CorelDRAW and importing the vectors into the Designer layout using the very useful DXF importer. This concludes Part 2 of the Pocket Cutting Tips tutorial.